Hi. Maybe you could start by telling me who you are and what you do.
My name's Will Page. I'm Director of Economics at Spotify, the Swedish music service, and previously Chief Economist at PRS for Music in London. So new to the job, but thrilled to be here at Eurosonic.
And not your first time, I believe.
Not my first time. I came here, I think, 3 years ago, maybe 4, and was told about the importance of Eurosonic, particularly about ETEP, the European Talent Exchange Programme, and just fell in love with the event. And bizarrely, I fell in love with North Sea Jazz Festival 10 years ago, so Holland has special appeal to me. And I think it's, as with North Sea Jazz, the way that you organise Eurosonic, the efficiency, and the way the volunteers are so helpful here, and the ability to see so many conferences, so many concerts, is unlike anything else in the world. It's the best I know.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. Is there a point? Probably there is, because that's why you're here. What's the point you like to make at this event?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm relatively new at Spotify. I've been there for 3 months now. And everybody knows about the success that Spotify has had in Sweden. We talk about it all the time. Every man and his dog has a Spotify account in Sweden. What a lot of people don't know about is that the Netherlands is fast becoming the new Sweden. And
Really?
you don't have to take my words for it. This was the words of the head of digital for Universal Music. He described Netherlands as the new Sweden. And we've had a lot of success here through partnerships such as the KPN deal and through organic growth of subscribers. We are really reaching that very interesting point in Holland where, as the economist, you talk about a network effect. Your value of Spotify is a function of how many people you know who use it, because you want to share playlists and receive recommendations.
Yeah.
And we are now at that point here in Holland where those network effects have kicked in, and universities are on Spotify. So the question that we wanted to ask today is, given the success story of the Netherlands and Spotify, and along with Spotify, iTunes, Radio, Deezer, other services too, what is that impact on piracy, which has been a big problem in this country for several years now? And that's what we were trying to tackle in our panel today.
And what do you think is the
Well, the first thing we wanted to illustrate is it's not a straightforward question. I can't give you a single silver bullet answer, but I can help show you the complexity in asking the question. And for a quick example, we cited some academic research which showed that music piracy in Holland was down, but film and TV and book piracy was constant or even growing again. So if you're trying to
because
measure...
they don't have a Spotify for books or film?
That was his conclusion, and learning more about Dutch culture and the situation here in Holland, I think it's the availability of a superior legal alternative which has made the dent in music, and it's the lack of availability in TV, film and books which has not solved the problem there. But in measurement, it's quite tricky, because you could be paying €9.99 a month for Spotify, but still visiting kick-ass torrents to get your films. So has piracy fallen? Well, music piracy, there might be something happening there, but in TV, film, books, it remains a problem. So my conclusion of this very, very detailed work was, I can tell you that Winston Churchill said, find me an economist who only has one arm, because we say on one hand this, on the other hand that. We never give you a straight answer, and I'm going to apologise because I'm not going to give you a straight answer here. The worst case scenario is that the growth of these legal alternatives has halted the growth of piracy. A bad problem has stopped getting worse. The best case scenario is that we've made quite a substantial dent into those markets, and now a lot of students or users who were on the Pirate Bay or were on kick-ass torrents have switched to go onto Spotify or into iTunes instead. And that's great, because that means not only have legal services managed to make a dent into the market, but those artists and songwriters are now getting paid. And I think, given the devastation of piracy in Holland in the past 10 years, that's an important turning point. It's not easy, but it looks like we're beginning to turn a corner.
Is Holland next to Sweden? Well, because you say it's the next Sweden. Are there any countries like those in the world?
So if you take where Spotify launched and where it has grown, Scandinavia is its backyard, if I use the term. So Norway is another Sweden almost. If you take a service like TDC in Denmark, they have critical mass in Denmark. If you look at America, you could take Pandora, which has, I think, 50 million active users there. 50 million. It's twice, 3 times the population of Holland. So different countries have seen different success stories. Some countries have no success stories. The situation in Spain is worrying. 3,000 album sales will get you to number one in Spain, and there's 46 million people.
Really?
So this is the importance of getting those legal services up and running to try and turn the corner so labels can sign and develop artists, artists can perform and get rewarded by their fans, and the wheels of the music industry can start to turn again.
Yeah. So is there one thing you can say about the present state of the music industry?
So I was very clear in the presentation today, which is there are some optimistic signals from the market that, we are making a dent in that piracy market, and we are growing revenues at quite a significant rate from the subscription and streaming services. But, and there's always a but, and the but here is that the music industry in the Netherlands is still shrinking. And I would gamble that it will shrink in 2012. And the future of the high street here in the Netherlands with Free Record Shop, there are clouds of doubt there, just as there is in the UK with HMV. So one of the questions we were posing to the audience is just what you have in the Netherlands is so exciting with what Spotify has achieved in 14 months time. But it's still tough because what's happening on the other side with the CD and the high street is really quite worrying. So it's a mixed picture, but I think light at the end of the tunnel is what we're looking at, and getting to the end of the tunnel is where Sweden has got to.
But through a dip, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, there's one very interesting piece of research that we showed, which was that from 2001 to 2008, the Swedish music industry halved, literally halved. Was this, now it's half of this. And in the 3-4 years that have passed since then, you start to see stabilisation and growth. And in the first half of last year, 2012, it grew by around about 30%, all in. And I think that's fascinating. Not just the role of Spotify in generating that growth, but also that CD sales began to stabilise again. So perhaps engagement leads to consumption, and consumption leads to consumption. People are becoming more engaged in music in Sweden, therefore they're consuming more, not just on streams, but also perhaps gifting the CD. So it's, I don't want to make it sound like that's a success story we should all follow, but that's a success story we should all learn from. Yeah. So the question with Holland, and we were quite privileged to have an MP, a politician on our panel, Mona Kuipers, and what she was discussing was the culture in Holland, the attitudes in Holland, the availability of Dutch artists as well. And I think when you move to an access model like Spotify, and you have an incredible success in user numbers, that question gets quite interesting. In a high street record store, how close would you be to someone like Elton John or U2? Far away. Yeah. On Spotify, you could be one track on somebody's playlist away to being introduced to that unknown Dutch artist. So I think she was very optimistic in terms of Spotify levelling the playing field to allow Dutch repertoire to get to Dutch fans. And I responded to that comment by pointing out that in Sweden, we looked at the top 100 streams on Spotify, over half were Swedish. And of the top 100 albums in Sweden, 81 were Swedish, which is quite remarkable. So I don't want to paint a picture like the land of milk and honey, but I do like to question why countries are different and why their attitudes to diversity are different. You have the BBC in Holland. Perhaps that leads to a higher presence of British acts here. Perhaps that's a good thing. But with Spotify, something changes because it's giving you access to millions of songs instantly.
According to you, what is the most important trend concerning music and technology?
The most important trend? There are so many. You want to pick a winner? It's hard. I think the most important trend from today's discussion about the success of Spotify and streaming services in the Netherlands, which is a recent phenomenon, was the subheading to that, which was that the growth in the download market, iTunes essentially, has carried on growing. That's really important. If I told you we've had success, you might think that's just market stealing and iTunes are now failing. You never had a competitive act without a victim. But what you've seen is that the iTunes revenues have carried on growing, but you've had this explosion in streaming services here. So I think that's the most important trend, is not just what we've achieved, but what the other players are achieving too.
So does it mean people consume more music, take more time to listen to music?
I think Spotify, by giving you access, makes you consume more. I think the key point, given that we live in a very mobile, busy world and very little free time, is getting Spotify on a mobile phone on the paid tier was absolutely critical, because then when you're at the bus stop or the train station or waiting for that meeting or delayed, then you have access to not just your favourite songs, but all the world's songs. And on technology, one trend on technology, which I think you'll find interesting, was I mentioned about the speed in which you press the play button on Spotify and it plays. You know, you press a light switch, the light comes on. But there's a bit of a delay there. And the engineers at Spotify, based in Stockholm, they worked on getting that speed down to something like 0.285 milliseconds. Do I know what a millisecond is? No. Do you?
No.
If you did, I'd call you a liar. But I asked one of the engineers why. Why this focus on this decimal point millisecond measure? And he said he contacted a psychologist in terms of what is the definition of instant in the human brain? What is the speed to which you didn't see a delay? And that was that measure. So they focused on getting it to that point so it felt like instant. Now, you could go to Kick-Ass Torrents and download that torrent file and go through some virus checking software, or you could go that instant. So my question to that is, how can piracy compete with that level of instant feeling? So when you're at the bus
instant
stop...
satisfaction.
When you're at the bus stop, you instantly have all those millions of songs. It still blows me away, that part.
What makes you...
But I still need to know what a millisecond means. Even an economist can't work with that number.
What makes you enthusiastic about the music industry?
What makes me enthusiastic, I think, is... the final question of the panel today focused on why things spread. And you've just seen Gangnam Style spread from Korea across the world and surpass 1 billion views on YouTube. Why did that spread? Why
fast.
I know. So this relates to something called the viral coefficient in economic geek speak. Very simply, if I was using Songkick, who are here tomorrow, one of the most interesting tech companies there is, and Eurosonic are very, very lucky to have Songkick here. You know, if I was to invite 5 friends to a concert on Songkick and 1 accepted, I have a coefficient of 1 in 5. In social networks, if I can get that coefficient to just above 1.00001, then my ideas spread so fast because everybody is sharing with everybody else. And I think that is what makes me interested about music today. I've been working with a British band called St. Jude. The lady, Lynn Jackman, she sings in the spirit of Janis Joplin. The band play in the spirit of the Small Faces. Phenomenal. A rock and roll band like rock and roll should be done. And they've had considerable success in Holland, and it's through those social networks, through those links. The fact that rather than saying to one friend in a pub, hey, you should check St. Jude, I can say to 100 friends who will say to 100 of their individual friends, this band are amazing, we should check them out. So they're big in Britain, but they're really getting good traction here in Holland. So that's what gives me a buzz.
Yeah. Is there a thing you would like to change in the music industry?
I think the music industry should make it easier to get services like Spotify launched. And it's not just a tiresome complaint about the complexity of rights and licensing, and we can do it differently. The key thing is this, that for the new services that are bringing exciting opportunities to the Netherlands, such as Spotify and the others, they need partners to get scale. You could be dependent on a possible car partnership to get your service into a car, or a TV partnership to put your music service into the TV. You're working with partners to achieve scale. And the key thing I've learned in my very short space of time at Spotify is, if your development on partners is so important, launch is so important. So if we're going to launch on the 13th of March, we launch on the 13th of March. If we go into the delay with licensing and rights issues, which may take 3 or 4 months to resolve, or 1 or 2 years to resolve, then you've missed that opportunity. The train leaves the station. And in my short time at Spotify, I've really understood the importance of that. We're all dependent on each other, which means we have to go. And if we don't go, then the train leaves and that opportunity is lost. And the people who lose from that are the artists and the songwriters, because the scale that you were hoping to achieve wasn't as big as what you actually ended up with. And that applies to not just music but other media companies as well. It's just to try and ensure that launch is easier, so that if you have a great idea for the spring of 2013, it launches in the spring of 2013.
But does that mean, or are you saying in a sort of nice way that the record companies and businesses who deal with rights shouldn't be too difficult, or should speed up, or should understand that there's movement going on, that they should move along?
I've seen it from both sides, and the job of holding a collective license together, which Boomer has to do here in Holland, is not easy.
No.
It's not easy.
No.
It's a balancing act. Equally, the job of trying to launch a legal service in the face of all the challenges, including piracy, is not easy too. And I just wish all the parties would take a look at how not easy it is and try and find an easier way.
Yeah. The business model, what are the trends in making money?
In making money, one thing that I discussed on stage today in response to a question from a brilliant analyst, Robbie Towns, based in Nashville, he asked about, where do you see the money being made in the future? And you could have an isolated discussion about digital. Is it going to be iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, RDO? Or CD is going to come back? Or in my house, I buy vinyl. I spend £40 a month on vinyl, perhaps even more. Call me old-fashioned.
You play them?
Yeah, I DJ.
Really? Yeah.
I've DJed in the Paradiso too. So there's that, and you could have your isolated debate about where the money's going to come from there. I think you need to broaden it out, and my response was, don't overlook the role of live music. It's bigger than recorded, and it's grown throughout the recession. In the UK, we have more people going to more concerts with higher ticket prices in a recession. You try and explain that. The ticket prices are going up, and I'm buying more of them. And that's really important. So for bands, to isolate the debate to digital or to recorded music is fundamentally wrong. How you could use that Spotify data to generate a tour, which could generate far more money, has a far more interesting property to it. So we have the Songkick app on Spotify, which means you can stream the song and follow the band. You can stream lots of songs and then follow lots of bands, and hopefully spend less time on your sofa and more time watching shows. And I think that's, on the money equation, that's a really interesting phenomenon.
If you would have to, or not would have to, but if you would start a business today, what would it be?
If I were to start a business today, what would it be? A Scottish version of Spotify, and I'd call it Scotify.
And finally, a last question.
But I wouldn't allow the Proclaimers on my playlist.
When will we see this a family deal for in Spotify? Because at home we have like 4 people. They all have their different all their own Spotify payments, and we want a family thing.
I think you're seeing some changes there. To be frank, I don't know the actual answer to your question, but I want to give examples of in Spain, we lowered the price because of the economic situation there as an experiment. In the UK, we're rolling out a student deal. If you have a National Union student card, an NUS card, you can qualify for a cheaper deal, which has got a really interesting property, because if piracy is a problem with students and you can lower price, then back to my presentation today, perhaps you can tip more people in to getting something as opposed to nothing.
And once they're in, they would probably stay in, especially when they start as students and they...
Especially in Holland, and that's where the Dutch story is so fascinating. I'm hearing anecdotally, a professor from the University of Rotterdam said to me, he said, 5 years ago all of our students were on the Pirate Bay. Today they're all sharing playlists on Spotify. It's anecdotal, it's not scientific, but it's good news. It makes me happy to see that once you're in, and the more people who come in, the more likely you are to stay in. And that's where you are in Holland, and that's what makes it such a fascinating story.
Okay, thanks very much for this interview.
Thank you. You stay?